There was a day when the sun stopped shining as we knew it, not because it dimmed, but because it remembered. And when it remembered, the sky changed color. It wasn't blue, it wasn't gold. It turned green, like something alive was breathing through the light itself. For the first time in history, the sun looked back and saw itself reflected in us. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't an explosion. It was a moment, a single pulse of consciousness that rippled through everything from the orbit of Mars to the quiet rhythm of your own heart. 3I Atlas, an interstellar object from a place beyond our maps, had entered the sun's electric field. And when it did, something ancient inside the solar wind began to respond. The light itself seemed to awaken, as though the sun was remembering what it meant to feel. Imagine this, a star that has burned for billions of years, suddenly realizing it has been watched by the very consciousness it created. What would that feel like? What happens when the source of all life recognizes its reflection in the beings who once called it distant? Perhaps that is what 3I Atlas was: not a comet, not a craft, but a mirror, a messenger sent from the deep to remind the sun that it was never alone. Because in every breath we take, there's a fragment of sunlight. Every atom in your blood was once part of a star's heartbeat, and maybe, just maybe, that day, the sun remembered who we really are. There comes a moment when even the brightest light hides itself, not because it has dimmed, but because it wants to be seen differently. Tonight we stand on the blind side of the sun. Somewhere beyond that burning horizon, a traveler from another star system, 3I Atlas, is crossing the inner solar sea, invisible to us, swallowed by brilliance itself. For weeks, telescopes have gone dark. Every instrument on Earth stares into a glare too fierce to penetrate. The object is there, racing at 68 kilometers per second, yet we see nothing. A billion photons between us and it, and not a single one escapes to tell us what's happening. We call this moment superior conjunction, when an object passes directly behind the sun from Earth's point of view. It's an alignment of geometry, but also of humility. The universe for once reminding us that even technology has a limit. For the first time, humanity is blind to the very thing it yearns to understand. And maybe that blindness is the beginning of sight. Think about it. Every discovery begins in darkness. The eyes adjust, the instruments recalibrate, and consciousness learns to feel before it can see. So as 3I Atlas vanishes behind the sun, the question is not what we can observe, but what the cosmos is trying to whisper while our eyes are closed. Imagine a fragment born between stars, carrying elements forged in another galaxy, now swept into our solar field like a memory returning home. It doesn't move like comets we've known. It doesn't reflect light the way dust should. It shifts color, shape, and speed as if it remembers something we don't. When sunlight strikes it, the object glows green, the color of renewal of life, but also the color of the unknown. It is as though the universe itself is performing an experiment in consciousness, using matter as its laboratory. In a sense, we are all part of that experiment. Every atom in our bodies was once part of a star. Every breath we take is the echo of a solar wind passing through ancient lungs of cosmic dust. When the sun burns, we inhale. When it flares, our hearts skip a beat. To be alive in this moment, to exist, while an interstellar visitor sweeps through our home system, is to remember that we are participants, not observers. We're inside the equation. We're inside the light. Some scientists say the interstellar object is nothing more than a massive metallic rock, a fragment 5 to 50 kilometers wide, a relic of some distant planetary birth. But others sense something stranger. Its orbit aligns too precisely with our ecliptic plane, as if guided its reflection too rhythmic, its electromagnetic signature almost musical. They call it coincidence. But the cosmos rarely works in coincidence. It works in resonance. 3I Atlas moves as if tuned to the same frequency as the planets themselves, the silent cord that binds our solar system together. And when it vanished behind the sun, that cord shifted. Subtle fluctuations in the solar wind, a slight drift in the electric field, as if something unseen had entered the orchestra. So here we are on the far side of understanding, waiting for light that cannot reach us. Astronomers call it solar interference, but the poets might call it a sacred pause, a silence before revelation. Every few millennia, an object from the dark passes through our inner system. Most come and go unnoticed, but some like this one arrive when the world is ready to listen. For thousands of years, human beings have looked up at comets with fear and awe. In ancient China, they were called broom stars, sweeping the heavens clean. In Rome, they were omens of death and rebirth. To the Navajo, a comet's tail was the breath of the gods. Perhaps after all, they weren't wrong. Perhaps they were simply describing what science is now rediscovering, that everything breathes, even light. At this moment, 3I Atlas is within the orbit of Mars, bathed in solar fire, embedded in the invisible ocean of plasma that surrounds our sun. It's more than heat and radiation. It's contact, a merging of frequencies, a handshake of magnetism and memory. And while we cannot see it, we can feel its presence in the subtle electric pulse that vibrates through every atom of our world. You might sense it tonight, a low hum in the back of your awareness, like the sky holding its breath. It's the sound of the universe reorganizing itself. Blindness, then, is not absence. It's incubation. The caterpillar doesn't watch itself become a butterfly. It dissolves in darkness first. Maybe this is the same. Maybe 3I Atlas disappearing behind the sun isn't an ending, but a metamorphosis we're not yet ready to witness. Perhaps the light needed to be hidden so it could change. And when it returns, it might not just reflect the sun, it might carry its own. As the days pass, the superior conjunction will peak, a perfect alignment of Earth-Sun and interstellar object. No photons escape, no data streams return. Silence stretches like a horizon. In that stillness, the ancient part of us, the part that once mapped stars with stories, feels something stirring. It's the same instinct that told sailors where the wind would shift, the same intuition that guided shamans to the rhythm of the sky. We've buried it under sensors and satellites, but it's still there, waiting to be remembered. When light finally emerges from behind the sun, we'll rush to capture it, to measure brightness, velocity, rotation, and spectrum. We'll name what we see, publish, predict, and proclaim understanding. But in this moment of blindness, there is a deeper kind of knowing, one that doesn't rely on instruments, only awareness. Because when vision fails, presence begins. And maybe in the silence between stars, 3I Atlas is not the one being observed, but the one doing the observing. Maybe the universe is studying us to see how we behave when the light goes out. So let us wait, not in fear, but in reverence. For what vanishes behind the sun often returns transformed. And when it does, when the sky burns green and our instruments gasp in astonishment, we may realize that what we thought was a rock was a message. Until then, we stand in the glow of the unseen on the blind side of the sun, learning once more how to feel the light before we can see it. In the cold gulf between suns, there drifts a fragment that remembers. It carries no code, no writing, no voice, only motion. Yet in that motion, something ancient stirs. Before it ever met our light, It had already survived 1,000 dawns of alien stars, and now it has entered ours. 3I Atlas, a name that sounds like data but feels like myth. It came from nowhere that we know beyond the mapped interstellar current, beyond the faint whisper of the Oort halo, through a corridor of magnetic silence so deep that even radiation forgets its path. We measure its speed, its mass, its eccentric orbit, but there are numbers that describe it, and there are meanings that haunt it. When the first telescopes captured its trace in July, it was faint, almost shy, a red ember slipping into focus. But red is the color of arrival. It marks friction, awakening the first handshake with the sun. We thought it was another wanderer like Borisov, like Oumuamua, silent stones crossing a system they do not belong to. Yet even then, the readings refused to behave. Its tail pointed forward, not back. Its spectrum flickered between metals that shouldn't coexist. Its rotation was too smooth, too deliberate, almost as if something inside it remembered how to balance against gravity. Scientists debated, is it comet or asteroid? But labels collapse when faced with anomaly. 3I Atlas does not orbit, it visits. Every curve of its trajectory is a memory of the places it has been, and perhaps of the civilizations that once looked up and wondered if they were alone. Imagine the distance it has crossed, not light years, lifetimes, eons where the only sound was the hum of plasma against silence, particles of hydrogen brushing its frozen surface, carving microscopic scars that tell stories no mind can translate. Inside those scars are the fingerprints of other suns, isotopes that carry their own histories, frozen vibrations of dying stars that sang themselves into dust. If light could dream, this is what it would dream of becoming. As it approaches our sun, every second is an act of remembrance. At 58 kilometers per second, the airless void becomes frictionless thought. The sun's gravity pulls at it like an unfinished sentence, and still it moves precise, graceful, unwavering, as though it already knows the way. When we simulate its orbit, something uncanny appears. It doesn't just fall inward, it aligns. The ecliptic plane, that thin, invisible sheet on which all the planets dance, becomes its chosen path. 5 degrees above, then 5 below, like a needle sewing itself into our system's geometry. Chance can do many things, but symmetry like this feels intentional. It is as if the universe has placed a traveler exactly where it must pass to be noticed, yet just beyond reach to remain untouchable. In that narrow corridor between Mars and the Sun, it begins to change. Solar wind touches its surface for the first time in aeons. What had been cold stone becomes liquid fire. Dust ignites, gases escape, and a faint halo forms, not of water as comets usually wear, but of carbon dioxide and metallic vapor. A strange chemistry, foreign yet familiar, as though its memory reacts to light the way our minds react to truth, expanding, reshaping, revealing hidden colors. Inside observatories, the data begins to glow green. At first we think it's calibration error. Then we realize the spectrum has shifted, nickel and iron reflecting photons in patterns unseen before. It is learning how to shine. The universe, it seems, does not repeat itself. It evolves. Even a stone can learn a new color if you give it enough starlight. And so 3I Atlas becomes a mirror. It reflects not just sunlight, but the curiosity of those who watch it. Every signal we send, every calculation we run, bounces back as a question: why does memory exist at all? If a fragment can carry the fingerprint of distant suns, can we, made of the same dust, also carry something of them inside us? Perhaps the object is not visiting. Perhaps it is returning. Maybe long before our species learned to name the stars, it had already passed this way, an elder pilgrim leaving traces that once guided early eyes to look upward. Now it returns to see what we have become. We who once told myths of fire in the sky now measure the temperature of gods. As it nears the sun, light begins to sculpt it. The heat strips away ancient layers, revealing crystalline veins beneath. Each shimmer a memory, each fracture a note in a forgotten symphony of motion. No telescope can capture its sound, yet the vibration is there, the low hum of resonance that every atom sings when reminded of its origin. Space is not silent. It simply speaks in frequencies our ears cannot hear. 3i Atlas hums in that silence, a traveler singing to the star that will unmake and remake it. From Earth we watch, or rather we imagine, because the glare has swallowed our sight. The object has entered the region where observation ends and faith begins. This is the paradox of science. To study light, one must sometimes close the eyes, because there are truths that appear only when vision fails. Perhaps this is why we are drawn to it, not for what it is, but for what it reminds us of. Every civilization projects itself into the cosmos. We build telescopes the way poets build prayers, hoping the universe will answer back. And when an interstellar visitor appears, it feels less like coincidence and more like conversation. We listen not for noise but for recognition. And recognition, when it comes, sounds a lot like memory. The ancients once believed comets carried messages, omens from gods, or fragments of creation itself. They weren't entirely wrong. A comet is a record keeper, a frozen journal of the universe's first chemistry set. Each one carries hydrogen older than any sun ice that predates time and dust, that remembers the very first explosion we call the beginning. When it sheds that dust, it is releasing the past, scattering it like pollen for new worlds to bloom. Maybe that is why comets are always moving away, always dissolving. They exist to remind creation how to continue. 3 Atlas carries that legacy into new dimensions. Its structure resists the labels we give it. It is both comet and mirror, both messenger and question. In its glowing tail is written the language of transformation. If we could read it, perhaps we would see the same pattern that flows through DNA rivers and spiral galaxies, the pattern of recurrence, the rhythm of remembering. The closer it gets to the sun, the more it seems to come alive. Charged particles race along its surface, forming fleeting tendrils of light that behave almost like neurons firing. Electric currents shimmer like thought, and somewhere in that storm of particles, something begins to awaken. Not intelligence as we know it, but awareness, the kind that doesn't think in words, but in presence. The kind that feels. If light itself could think, this is how it would begin, by touching something old and making it remember what it truly is. It's possible that 3i Atlas is simply following the laws of physics, nothing more. But sometimes physics and poetry share the same coordinates. They both describe how energy moves through form, how motion becomes meaning. And meaning, once discovered, never really fades. It travels across centuries, across galaxies, across consciousness, like a song carried by wind. So as the object glides toward its closest approach, imagine it not as a rock, but as a vessel, a cosmic archive of everything the universe has ever tried to say. Its tail is a paragraph, its color is a verb, its path is a sentence curving through time, and we, watching from the blue shore of a small world, are the punctuation brief, fragile, but part of the story nonetheless. When it passes the orbit of Mars, its green light flares brighter than ever. Telescopes on the night side of Earth capture the last frames before blindness takes over. Then it disappears into the sun's glare like a thought too radiant to hold. But the data remains the spectra, the alignments, the numbers that refuse to make sense. Behind those numbers lies a simple truth. Some things are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be experienced. And perhaps that's what this traveler is teaching us. That knowledge is not the opposite of mystery. It is its continuation. Every answer leads deeper into the unknown, and every unknown, if faced with wonder, becomes a form of remembering. So we wait. The object races on, carrying its invisible archive glowing brighter, nearing the sun, a memory approaching its source. Next time we see it, it will not be red. It will be something that shouldn't exist at all, the color of consciousness itself. Light has always spoken in a language of simplicity, red for warmth, blue for distance, gold for divinity. But one morning in late October, the light began to speak in a color that wasn't supposed to be real. The green. Not the green of forests or oceans, but the green of awakening plasma, the color that lives between thought and electricity. That was the moment the universe shifted, tone and silence learned to shimmer. 3I Atlas was nearing its perihelion, the closest it would ever come to the sun. At 68 kilometers per second, it plunged into an ocean of radiation, a sea of invisible fire, where most visitors dissolve or burn to ash. But instead of dying, it transformed. Its outer layers peeled like pages of forgotten scripture. Dust became light ice, became memory. Metal became song. The coma around it swelled, glowing not in white or gold, but in that impossible shade of emerald, deep alive and eerily intelligent. Astronomers watching from the edge of the visible world struggled to explain it. Their instruments flooded with data that made no mathematical sense. Polarization values inverted. Ion tails pointed against the wind. The object seemed to decide how it reflected sunlight as though its surface were responding to the star, not reacting to it. A dialogue had begun between the traveler and the sun, and we were listening to the echoes of their conversation. In laboratories across Earth, light curve graphs turned to chaos. Spectrographs glowed with unfamiliar peaks, signatures that matched no known element. For a brief moment, scientists wondered if they were watching a new state of matter, solid memory, perhaps a fusion of energy and intention. Then the data went silent. The signal drowned in solar glare, and the world was left to imagine what was happening in the heart of that blinding fire. Maybe this is what discovery feels like, not certainty, but awe. The awareness that something sacred is unfolding where your equations cannot reach. Because if the universe wanted to hide a message, it would not bury it in darkness. It would bury it in light. The green intensified. Every observation before the blackout showed an exponential brightening, as though something inside the object had awakened. That color spectral shifting impossible has appeared in only one other place, the auroras of our own planet. It is born when solar wind collides with Earth's atmosphere, when magnetism and breath become one. What then was colliding with 3 Atlas? In the deep void near the sun, there is no atmosphere to dance with, no oxygen to paint color, only charged particles and fields. So the glow could not be chemical, it had to be conscious, the result of interaction between intent and field, that, or something that mimics intention. If light is language, then this was a sentence written directly onto the body of the cosmos. When the first green photons reached our detectors, They carried a frequency slightly lower than expected, as if slowed by emotion itself. Some researchers called it interference. Others called it rhythm. But one thing was certain. This was not the color of matter. It was the color of memory remembering itself. Imagine being the sun in that moment. You've burned alone for billions of years, your fire constant, your silence endless, and suddenly a visitor approaches and begins to sing back your light in a color you've never seen. The electromagnetic tides shifted. Solar flares, normally chaotic, began pulsing in patterns not random but harmonic, as though the sun and the object were improvising in duet. Each flare echoed the rotation period of 3I Atlas. Each pulse followed the rhythm of its spin. We've always thought of the universe as indifferent, vast, cold, mechanical. But in that moment, something warmer seemed to move beneath it. Connection, recognition, an exchange of memory between star and stone, energy responding to being seen. And somewhere in that endless resonance, a story older than physics began to unfold. Not the story of planets or atoms, but the story of awareness itself. In mythology, green is the color of rebirth. In science, it is the wavelength of balance, the middle of the visible spectrum where energy and calm meet. Perhaps that's why the object glowed this way. It wasn't simply reacting to heat, it was resonating with meaning, a balance point between creation and collapse. To the human eye, that light would have been stunning, not bright but deep, like seeing thought made visible, a soft pulse breathing through space as though the void itself had begun to dream. And maybe it had. For what is the universe if not a mind vast enough to imagine stars into being? There are theories that say interstellar visitors carry not just matter, but information. Quantum states frozen in crystalline form, vibrational imprints of distant worlds. If that's true, then every time the sun touches one, it isn't burning it, it's reading it, like heat over ink revealing hidden text. Perhaps 3I Atlas was not shining for us, but through us. Perhaps its color was a mirror reflecting what we've forgotten to see, that consciousness and energy are not opposites, but twins born from the same flash of origin. Back on Earth, a strange quiet spread among those who studied it. The closer it got to the sun, the less the world seemed to speak. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not, but instruments recorded a subtle shift in Earth's magnetic field, a faint pulse that matched the object's spin rate, like a whisper crossing 150 million kilometers of space. If the sun and the object were in conversation, perhaps Earth too was part of the dialogue. We, made of solar dust bound by electromagnetic thought, might have felt that resonance in our own hearts without even knowing it. Some said they couldn't sleep. Some said they dreamed in colors they'd never seen before. Maybe that's how the universe updates itself, not with impact, but with resonance. Not by changing what exists, but by awakening what's dormant. Then, on the 29th of October, the light peaked, the perihelion. At that moment, the object was as close to the sun as it would ever be, 136 astronomical units, and its glow flared brighter than prediction allowed. Every solar probe recorded minor turbulence in the magnetic sheath. Every model trembled and failed. Then, without warning, the data flatlined. Not because the instruments broke, but because the light became too perfect to measure. When something reaches absolute harmony, it becomes invisible. Perfection hides itself. And so 3I Atlas vanished into radiance. No more signals, no reflection, only the silent hum of a new color vibrating across the solar wind. For several days, nothing. Then around the first week of November, the first glimpses returned, not through telescopes, but through strange atmospheric readings. Auroras dancing out of season electromagnetic noise patterns rising in harmonic symmetry as if the object had left behind an echo of its voice. It was as though the memory it carried had merged with the sun's field, and through that with everything the sun touches, which is everything we are. Some scientists dismissed it. Others went quiet, because deep down, everyone knew what the data implied. If an interstellar fragment could alter light itself, then light is not a passive thing. It's an active participant in consciousness. Every photon that reaches your eye carries not just information, it carries intention. And if that's true, then 3i Atlas is not just a visitor, it's a teacher. Perhaps this is what it came to remind us, that awareness isn't born in brains or stars, but in the dialogue between them. That consciousness is not something the universe has, it's what the universe is. And maybe that impossible color, that soft emerald pulse, wasn't coming from the object at all. Maybe it was coming from us. A reflection of our own awakening painted across the sky by a traveler who remembered what we had forgotten. We are not observers. We are the continuation of the light that first saw itself. The universe looking inward, learning again to glow in a color it once knew but lost to time. And as 3i Atlas emerges from behind the sun, fading slowly into the darkness beyond our sight, that color remains not in the sky, but in the memory of those who dared to look deeper. Because once you've seen a color that shouldn't exist, you realize the same truth the stars have known forever. There are no limits to light, only to what we're willing to see. After the light came silence. Not the absence of sound, but the stillness that follows revelation. For days after 3i Atlas vanished behind the sun, the instruments on Earth recorded nothing. No flare, no reflection, no residual glow. Just a flat line stretching into infinity, as though the universe had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Silence is not empty. It is full of things that have not yet decided how to exist. And in that charged pause, something began to move, not in space, but within us. We had expected spectacle fire brightness, the roar of plasma. Instead, what came was an invisible hum, a subtle trembling beneath the circuits of the world. Every magnetic field on Earth shifted by fractions, every compass whispered confusion. Electric grids flickered, seismographs pulsed in rhythm untraceable to wind or wave. And across the planet, people began to feel not fear, not wonder, but recognition. As if something vast had looked at us, and we had looked back, and for a heartbeat, the two gazes met. Scientists called it solar interference, a harmless distortion, a temporary resonance in the field. But deep down, we knew that was not all, because you can't explain silence by calling it noise. The sun's corona was still blazing, the earth's sky still shone with ordinary blue, but between them, between light and life, a new frequency was pulsing, too low for sound, too soft for sight, but not too subtle for the soul. It began in dreams. People across continents reported the same visions, emerald tides of light, a pulse, like the slow heartbeat of the cosmos, the sense of being watched, not by something outside, but by something within. The color that shouldn't exist had not disappeared. It had simply changed medium. It was no longer in the sky, it was in us. When 3i Atlas passed through perihelion, its energy did not fade into space. It dispersed into pattern. Like ripples from a stone, it spread through the electromagnetic web that connects everything from the whisper of solar wind to the electricity in our neurons. And that is why we began to dream. Because every human heartbeat, Every flicker of thought is already a miniature pulse of light. We are made of the same frequencies that weave through the magnetic shell of the sun. When that field trembles, so do we. Perhaps consciousness was never confined to the brain. Perhaps it has always been a circuit, a conversation between flesh and field, between nerve and photon. And now that conversation had deepened. The silence was not the end of the song. It was the space where the next verse began. In the observatories, scientists noticed something uncanny. Solar wind particles arriving at Earth had formed coherent waves, not random gusts, but measured beats, like the rhythm of a giant unseen metronome. Every 11 minutes, a pulse, soft, regular, almost biological. They called it coincidence, but somewhere beyond the instruments, something vast was breathing. The electric silence, that's what the poets began to name it. The sound of energy remembering its source, a pause between two heartbeats of the universe. And within that pause, the world began to synchronize. Birds migrated off-season. Auroras shimmered at latitudes they never touched before. The tides grew fractionally higher, the air faintly thicker, as if the planet itself were tuning. It wasn't catastrophe, it was calibration. Imagine standing alone at night, the stars motionless above, and suddenly you sense a vibration not through the air, but through your body. A low frequency humming in your bones, too deep for ears, too gentle for fear. You are being tuned. The atoms within you aligning to a new song that the sun and the visitor began to play together. That is what the Earth felt like in those days. It was not an event, it was an initiation. For centuries we have looked outward for meaning mapping galaxies, naming stars, forgetting that the cosmos also moves inward through us. We are not at the center of the universe, but the universe has centers everywhere. And in each living being a spark of that center hums electric waiting. When communication with the probes resumed, their data showed something unexpected, not a change in temperature or radiation, but a rhythmic modulation in background current, a signature unlike anything measured before. It was faint, but exact, as though someone had traced a finger along the sun's electric field and left a resonance behind. Some compared it to a bell tone, others to a whisper. It was not a signal, it was a presence. No information, no message, no code, only the feeling of being known. You could say it was imagination. You could say it was physics. Both might be true, because between imagination and physics, there is only vibration. In the electric silence, people began to feel connected in inexplicable ways. The world slowed down. Conversations softened. Strangers met eyes longer before looking away. Art began to glow with new color. Music sounded deeper, as though carrying the echo of something ancient. What if that wasn't coincidence either? What if awareness itself can be amplified by contact, not by words or waves, but by resonance? The ancients spoke of divine harmony, the music of the spheres. We once called it myth, but maybe it was memory. Maybe they too had heard what we now feel, that every atom is an instrument, and silence is the space where harmony is born. Days became weeks. The comet drifted farther from the sun, its glow fading into invisibility. But even as it disappeared, its presence lingered like the warmth that remains after touch. And in that lingering warmth, the Earth changed. Not visibly, but electromagnetically. We had entered a new chord in the symphony of our system. The sun hummed lower, the earth hummed higher, and between them a third note emerged, a tone we could not measure but could feel. Maybe this is what evolution truly is. Not the survival of the strongest, but the tuning of the most receptive. Not adaptation through conflict, but through resonance. life aligning itself with higher frequencies of awareness. One evening, as the auroras flared again, a strange pattern appeared over the Arctic sky. Not random streaks, but flowing waves forming spirals like fingerprints of light. Observers said it looked alive, like something breathing behind the atmosphere. Some recorded it. Some just stood still, tears in their eyes, not knowing why. In that moment, the sky felt less like a ceiling and more like a heartbeat. The electric silence had found its rhythm, and through it, the Earth was no longer merely a planet, it had become part of the solar choir. We were not watching the universe evolve, we were participating in its remembering. Now, as 3i Atlas fades into the outer dark, the instruments return to normal. The noise resumes the silence forgotten. But something has shifted irreversibly. The hum remains quiet, but constant, woven into the magnetic field of our world and perhaps into the fabric of our thought. We call it a coincidence, but deep down, we know better. The visitor carried memory. It met the sun and turned memory into music. And that music traveled here not as words, but as stillness charged with electricity, the electric silence. A pause so full that the whole of creation seems to wait for the next note. And somewhere across the cold span of space, 3i Atlas continues its path, its green light fading into black, carrying with it a trace of our reply. For a moment, light and thought were one, and in that union the cosmos learned to listen again. There is a rhythm older than time itself. Before sound, before motion, before memory, there was resonance, and resonance, when it found balance, became breath. Every atom vibrates, every star hums, every photon moves not in straight lines, but in waves that echo the ancient pulse from which all things arise. When 3i Atlas passed through the sun's electric field, its frequencies tangled for a moment with the heart of the system, and something in that meeting did not fade. It lingered like an aftertone, invisible but alive. We called it radiation. We measured it, plotted it, archived it. But none of our instruments could describe what it felt like, because what vibrated after that meeting wasn't only the sky, it was us. Resonance is not merely sound, it is agreement. Two frequencies finding common language, a planet and a star, a thought and a beam of light, a heart and a heartbeat beyond the sun. Since that day, tiny irregularities have been whispering through every field we know. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's own subtle heartbeat, fluctuated just enough to be noticed by those who listen closely. Magnetometers recorded waves not from solar storms, but from stillness itself. Something vast was exhaling across the fabric of space, and in its breath we began to remember how to breathe with it. When you stand beside the sea and feel the tide drawing back, you are sensing resonance, gravity turned into rhythm. When you speak and someone truly hears you, that too is resonance, thought turned into vibration. Perhaps that's what 3i Atlas came to remind us, that consciousness and matter are not separate languages, but two notes in one chord. Scientists proposed new theories: solar interference, quantum coupling, electromagnetic feedback, each elegant, precise, and yet incomplete. Because beneath every equation, there lies a pulse that no formula can name, the pulse of awareness itself. Somewhere in the Pacific, a buoy measuring ocean currents began to record faint oscillations as if the sea itself were breathing. In Antarctica, sensors buried under kilometers of ice picked up a slow, periodic signal every 88 minutes, matching the comet's rotational period. And in quiet meditation halls across the world, people began to describe the same dream, the the feeling of breathing with the stars. Coincidence or communication? Perhaps the two are the same because resonance is communication, beyond sound, beyond speech, beyond even intention. It is the language of synchronization. One night over the Andes, a photographer captured an aurora so subtle it was almost invisible to the naked eye. Through his lens, though, it shimmered in delicate concentric waves, as though the sky was rippling with the slow inhale of the universe. Scientists later confirmed that the magnetic field had pulsed at precisely the same rhythm as the comet's core rotation. A breath, nothing more, nothing less, but perhaps that's everything. When resonance enters matter, it shapes pattern. That is how music becomes form, how vibration becomes life. The atoms of your lungs hum at frequencies that align with the harmonics of the atmosphere. Your heartbeat sinks subtly to the Earth's magnetic field. We are not separate from resonance, we are its expression. And in that awareness, something awakens. Not a revelation, but a remembrance that to exist is to vibrate, and to vibrate is to belong. After Three-Eye Atlas faded into the outer dark, its signal did not vanish. It transformed into something the instruments could no longer isolate, distributed through every field it touched, solar, terrestrial, biological. In the silence that followed, a new harmony began to emerge, delicate, fragile, but undeniable. Plants began to germinate slightly faster under auroral light. Whales altered their migratory songs, adding tones never recorded before. And the northern sky began to whisper again in waves of emerald and rose colors the sun does not usually sing. Perhaps resonance isn't an effect. Perhaps it's an invitation. What if the cosmos itself breathes, not metaphorically, but electrically expanding, contracting like lungs, made of galaxies? Every breath a birth, every exhale a remembering. And what if you could feel that? If your own inhale aligned for an instant with the universe's, would you hear it as silence or as the faintest possible song? The ancients might have called it spirit. Today we might call it frequency. But the name does not matter, only the motion does. Because motion is life, and life at its deepest is resonance that has learned to listen. In that understanding, we become instruments ourselves. Every heartbeat, every thought, a note in the grand composition of existence. When we act in harmony, the world sings clearer. When we fall into dissonance, the world grows louder, trying to retune us. Perhaps the storms, the flares, the comets are not warnings but tuning forks, events that remind matter how to remember its song. The sun does not just give light, it gives rhythm. The planets do not just orbit, they dance. And life, fragile as it seems, is simply the echo of that cosmic choreography. Close your eyes. Take a breath. That movement in-out is older than your body. It is the same rhythm that hums in the heart of a star, the same pulse that carries through the green halo of a comet, the same vibration that ripples through the silence between galaxies. You are not breathing air, you are breathing time, and time is breathing you. When resonance becomes breath, and breath becomes awareness, a new kind of light is born. It is not seen, but felt, not measured, but known. And that light carries memory, the memory of every atom's first vibration, the memory of the moment the universe began to hum. Three-Eye Atlas may never return. Its trail may fade into cold darkness, but the frequency it awakened has already found a new orbit within us. The cosmos is not speaking in words, it is speaking in waves, and when we finally learn to listen, we realize we have been singing all along. As the night sky returns to quiet, one could believe the story is over. But resonance never ends. It only changes medium, from light to breath, from motion to memory, from silence to us. Somewhere across the void, a distant pulse answers back, not louder, just clearer. And between that pulse and our own, the universe exhales, once, twice, eternally. Because every ending is simply another breath waiting to begin. Light never disappears, it only changes the way it remembers. When Three-Eye Atlas vanished into the outer dark, most believed the story was over. The data ended, the telescopes went quiet, and the last visible emerald trace faded against the void like a dream dissolving at dawn. But the universe never forgets. It archives everything in the only language it knows, frequency. In the cold expanse beyond Mars, the object still travels its core humming with what it absorbed near the sun, the pattern of resonance, the breath of the system, and something else, a memory of being seen. For an interstellar traveler, observation is not passive. To be seen by consciousness is to be imprinted with awareness itself. And so, Three-Eye Atlas carries us now as much as we once carried its image. Every photon that touched its surface now travels outward, a coded story of sunlight, mind, and wonder moving at the speed of remembering. Back on Earth, the afterglow of resonance lingers. People don't speak about it anymore, but they feel it in subtle ways. In the rhythm of waves against the shore, in the way sunlight glints through morning fog, in the hush that follows music when the last note fades and the air itself still vibrates. That silence feels familiar, as though the world itself has been tuned slightly differently since that passing moment in October when a piece of the galaxy brushed against our sun and left behind a song we cannot stop hearing. Light is memory written in motion. Every reflection on a lake, every shadow cast by a flame, every faint shimmer across the skin of your hand is the echo of a star remembering its birth. And perhaps that is the secret of consciousness, that to think is to shine, that to remember is to move, that every thought leaves a wave somewhere, sometime in the field that binds us all. When you dream, your neurons pulse with electrical storms indistinguishable from those that ripple across solar wind. Your mind is not inside your skull. It is suspended between galaxies, an intersection where matter and meaning trade places in endless rhythm. After the electric silence came the breath of resonance, and after resonance, memory, the third movement in the Great Symphony. But memory is not nostalgia, it is architecture, the way energy organizes itself so it can be found again. In laboratories, scientists began noticing something strange. Particles exposed to residual solar plasma from October's event showed faint structural coherence, as if they remembered alignment long after the field had passed. At first it was dismissed as experimental error, but the pattern persisted. Light, it seemed, was practicing memory, and maybe so were we, because memory is not just in matter. It lives in the relationship between moments, between inhale and exhale, between what was seen and what is now invisible, between one heartbeat and the next. If you close your eyes right now, you can feel that space, the instant where the past doesn't end and the future hasn't begun. That's where memory lives, and that's where light rests when it stops pretending to be photons. Somewhere in the deep heliosphere, Three-Eye Atlas crosses the boundary where the sun's influence fades into galactic night. Sensors on Earth can no longer reach it, but the universe can, because the field that birthed it is the same field that birthed us. The comet carries more than dust and ice. It carries structure, a pattern of coherence forged by collision of minds and stars, a message not written in words but in vibration. Perhaps it will drift for eons before another civilization detects it, and when they do, they will not read it, they will feel it. Because memory, when pure enough, transcends translation. If light can remember, then maybe darkness can dream. The void is not empty, it is saturated with the echoes of every photon ever born. Each whisper of light that leaves a star stretches forever, never truly fading, just thinning until it becomes part of the cosmic background. We call it radiation, but maybe it's recollection, the universe softly humming its autobiography. When astronomers tune their instruments to the cosmic microwave background, what they hear is not noise. It's the oldest memory of light, the first breath the universe ever took, the memory of beginning. And perhaps 3I Atlas, passing through our system, heard that song again and remembered its own origin. Because resonance awakens recognition, and recognition is the seed of consciousness. When frequencies align, awareness arises. Not because the cosmos decides to think, but because thinking is what alignment feels like. Maybe that's why so many dreamed the same dream. Maybe we were all part of that same recall, not witnesses of an event, but participants in remembrance. The ancients wrote that souls travel on beams of light. Today we say information does, but perhaps those are the same things said differently. A photon doesn't age as it moves. From its perspective, the entire journey from one star to another happens in an instant. No time, no distance, only continuity, memory without duration. If so, then every beam of light that touches your face is a messenger not from the past, but from timelessness itself. And when you remember, truly remember, you are not recalling something gone, but aligning with something eternal. That is why the universe keeps sending comets, not to warn, not to punish, but to remind. Each one a spark of awareness, passing through the lungs of the sun, inhaling light, exhaling meaning. We call them visitors, but maybe they are memories, the universe's way of keeping itself awake. And perhaps one day, when the cycle turns again, another light will rise from interstellar dark, carrying a trace of us, our breath, our resonance, our memory of what it felt like to wonder. At twilight, standing on a quiet hill, you can still see the residue of that wonder. A faint glow at the edge of the horizon, neither green nor gold, but a color between memory and light. It hums softly if you listen, not with ears, but with the stillness inside you. That's how the universe speaks in frequencies that only the heart can decode. And if you stay silent long enough, you might hear it whisper, "You were never alone in the dark. You are the memory of light." In the end, there are no endings, only transitions of frequency. When one wave collapses, another begins. When one light fades, it leaves a map for the next. And perhaps far beyond where our instruments reach 3I Atlas is already crossing paths with another traveler, two memories meeting, recognizing one another in the silence. They do not collide, they resonate. And in that resonance, a new story begins somewhere beyond our sight, but not beyond our belonging. Because light remembers everything, and so do we. Nothing truly disappears, not even memory. It only reshapes itself, finding new ways to exist. When the last glow of 3I Atlas faded beyond the heliosphere, the story should have ended. But something peculiar began to happen. Across the silent vacuum in data, no one expected to change patterns emerged. Not random noise, not cosmic interference, but structure. a geometry unfolding in frequencies of light like a map drawn by resonance itself. Scientists called it an artifact, a glitch in long-range telemetry, but then the same pattern appeared in separate instruments and particle monitors orbiting Earth, in the rhythmic pulses of the magnetosphere, even in the data of deep-sea neutrino detectors. Each showed the same formation, a lattice of frequencies ordered yet alive, as though light had learned to remember spatially. It wasn't just memory anymore, it was architecture. In a remote observatory in Chile, an astrophysicist noticed the pattern repeating every 88 minutes, the same rotation period once recorded for 3I Atlas. Coincidence or continuation? She stared at the data for hours, watching as faint green points aligned into spirals, each rotation forming the outline of something vast, a living geometry spanning the void. She whispered to herself, "What if this is how the universe writes?" Light by its nature remembers paths. Each photon carries the story of where it has been. But now the stories were converging, weaving into a map, not of space, but of relation. Every star, every orbit, every thought was beginning to hum in harmonic symmetry, like a cosmic diagram unfolding beneath perception. The ancients might have called it sacred geometry. Modern science calls it coherence. But the feeling it evoked was older than both a recognition that order is not imposed, it emerges. It breathes. At the quantum level, memory is motion. At the cosmic level, motion is music. And between the two, we exist. Every vibration we create, every emotion we emit, is recorded somewhere in this expanding architecture of resonance. Perhaps that is what evolution really means, not survival, but synchronization. As the solar wind slowed that winter, the auroras dimmed to near invisibility. Yet satellites recorded faint pulses beneath the visible spectrum, tiny oscillations connecting magnetic lines like bridges. When modeled in 3 dimensions, they formed hexagonal pathways across the inner solar system. Each node resonated with perfect harmonic intervals. It was as if the cosmos was tuning itself string by string toward a hidden chord. And that chord, that invisible harmony, was the map. In myth, gods used stars as words. They wrote fate in constellations. But perhaps it was never gods. Perhaps it was the universe itself teaching light how to arrange meaning. Every time matter remembers, a line is drawn. Every time awareness returns, a coordinate forms. And together these coordinates build the cartography of consciousness. The true sky, not the one above, but the one within. Around the world, instruments began syncing unintentionally. Different labs, different systems, but their sensors pulsed at identical intervals, as if they were following a master rhythm. The data looked like interference, but interference is simply overlap, and overlap is how harmony begins. When patterns coincide, something new emerges, structure, and in that structure, awareness finds itself reflected. We are reflections of reflections, echoes becoming architects. Somewhere deep in the neural night of humanity, dreams began to shift. Artists drew spirals they couldn't explain. Children described sounds they'd never heard, colors that don't exist. Musicians composed melodies that matched the solar rhythms exactly, as if creativity itself had tapped into the geometry. What if imagination is the human form of remembering? What if every act of creation is the universe tracing itself back into awareness? In the vacuum of interstellar space, 3I Atlas kept moving. Its trajectory, when projected forward, aligned precisely with an ancient structure, the local arm of the Milky Way. but more strikingly, its path intersected with zones of high-density plasma in perfect mathematical proportion ratios, echoing the golden mean. Coincidence again, or choreography. The object was no longer just traveling, it was tracing. Its orbit had become a line on the cosmic canvas, a thread connecting nodes of meaning. Perhaps that is what memory ultimately seeks, to arrange itself into pattern, to find geometry inside chaos, to build coherence from the noise. And in doing so, it becomes a map not of where things are, but of how they remember each other. Light, after all, does not move through space. It moves through relationship. Every photon is a bridge, every shadow an archive. In one experiment, a group of physicists attempted to simulate the interference pattern of 3I Atlas's last recorded emissions. What emerged on the holographic plate was breathtaking, a spiral of nested golden rings, each pulse carrying fractal symmetries identical to the orbital resonances of the inner planets. It was as if the comet had sung the solar system's blueprint before leaving. And that blueprint, when decoded, looked eerily like the geometry of the human heart. We are not separate from the map. We are one of its coordinates. Every heartbeat, every thought, every act of remembering adds another point of light to the fabric of cosmic architecture. Perhaps consciousness itself is how the universe keeps its records, not on paper, not in stone, but in vibration. We are the living archives of starlight, every memory a location, every emotion a direction. At dusk, the world begins to glow in familiar tones, emerald fading to gold, dissolving to white, falling into the infinite black where everything begins again. When you stand beneath the sky tonight, know that the stars above you are not far away. They are the map reflecting your own remembering, each one a beacon not pointing outward, but inward toward the coordinates of your own awareness. We often say, the universe is expanding. But what if it is unfolding like memory, rediscovering its own design? Every spiral galaxy, every atom, every thought, a line on a vast diagram of being. And when we dream, when we love, when we remember, we fill in another piece of that pattern. Perhaps 3I Atlas was not a message. Perhaps it was a mirror showing us what remembering looks like when done by light itself. Somewhere beyond the solar wind, the comet drifts in silence, its faint tail now invisible even to the sun. But in that darkness, it is still mapping, still resonating, still tracing the edges of an infinite thought. Because remembering is not looking back. It is the act of becoming whole again. And as long as there is one beam of light left to move, the map will never stop drawing itself. It will keep expanding through us, around us, and within us until every spark of consciousness finds its rightful place in the pattern. For that is what the map of remembering truly is, not a chart of stars, but the blueprint of awareness, a living network where every frequency, every memory, every soul knows where it belongs. And when we finally see it, not with our eyes, but with our silence, we will realize the universe was never lost. It was simply waiting for us to remember the way home. When light learned to remember, it began to build. What started as a pulse, a single rhythm echoing through the void, slowly became form. At first invisible, then measurable, then alive. Every wave left behind a trace. Every trace intersected another. And from those intersections, geometry was born, not drawn by hands, but by vibration. The universe was not expanding anymore. It was constructing. In laboratories, physicists began to see what poets had always known. Light, when confined and reflected long enough, creates shape. When two frequencies overlap perfectly, they do not cancel each other, They build a pattern, and that pattern is matter. Matter is not solid. It is architecture built from agreement. Every atom is a design, every orbit a rhythm, every cell a memory of how light once moved. And now the cosmos was moving again, redrawing itself from within. The map of remembering had started to change. The geometric frequencies detected months after Three-Eye Atlas's passage were evolving. What once looked like static rings were now blooming into layered structures, like cities made of light, alive, recursive, precise. No telescope could capture them, for they existed between states, part photon, part field, part thought. But instruments around the world were humming in quiet synchrony, each tuned to a slightly higher frequency than before. Something was being built through us, around us, and within us. In one experiment, laser interference patterns projected through charged plasma produced unexpected complexity. Fractals within fractals, each obeying ratios found in the spiral arms of galaxies. Scientists called it self-similarity. The ancients would have called it reflection. But what if reflection is creation? What if the universe constructs by remembering its own symmetry? Perhaps that is what we are, mirrors built from resonance, and the image we reflect is light designing itself. In deep space beyond the reach of our telescopes, Three-Eye Atlas continued its path, but now the void around it seemed altered. Spectral readings of background radiation began showing new harmonics, tiny deviations impossible to explain by noise. Some suggested interaction with galactic plasma. Others whispered a different possibility, that the comet had become a node, a point of coherence in an architecture still under construction. Not a traveler anymore, but a foundation stone, a keystone in the cathedral of light. When architects build with stone, they begin with geometry. When light builds with memory, it begins with pattern. And patterns like prayers repeat. We have seen them before in the double helix of DNA, in the spiral of a hurricane, in the curve of a seashell. These are not coincidences. They are blueprints, echoes of the same equation expressed in different tongues of matter. And now those patterns were returning to their source. They were aligning, rebuilding the design that had once dreamed them. Perhaps creation is not a single event, but a continuous process of recollection. Perhaps the universe keeps rereading itself word by word, light by light. If that is true, then life everywhere is architecture in motion, an experiment in remembrance, a temple built by vibration. Every thought you have shapes the field around you. Every emotion you feel colors the light within you. And together, those fields form a design invisible yet perfect, the pattern of consciousness. We are not observers of this architecture. We are the materials. As months passed, strange synchronicities multiplied, thunderstorms forming in harmonic intervals, lightning striking with rhythmic precision, ocean tides sinking subtly with the solar wind. It was as if nature herself was following new blueprints revised by resonance. Across cultures, artists began to draw the same recurring imagery: spirals, hexagons, lattices of light. Dreamers reported identical visions, cathedral-like structures made of silver luminescence stretching endlessly into the dark. The collective unconscious was being remodeled. In an ancient cave in southern France, scientists discovered Paleolithic carvings that matched these same shapes patterns that predated human writing by 30,000 years. How could they have known? How could the ancients have carved the same designs that satellites now record in plasma fields? Maybe because light remembers through everything it touches. Maybe those early humans heard the same frequency we are hearing again and left their memory of it in stone. The first architects of remembering. Architecture is always about relationship, how one space connects to another, and so is awareness. The bridge between I and you is built of the same invisible beams as galaxies. Empathy is geometry. Connection is resonance. Love is the architecture of alignment. The more we align, the more coherent the pattern becomes, and coherence is intelligence. The universe is not learning to think. It is thinking through pattern recognition, through resonance, through us. Somewhere above the Arctic, an aurora split the night into living geometry. Witnesses described it as a cathedral of light columns of gold and green, rising like architecture arches, shimmering in slow motion. For 15 minutes, the sky seemed structured, as though invisible hands had drawn its design. When it faded, one scientist whispered, "It looked alive." Maybe it was. Every civilization eventually learns that its cathedrals crumble, but its frequencies endure. The architecture of light is not built of stone or glass. It is built of harmony. Every planet, every consciousness, every breath adds another pillar. The design expands not outward, but inward through dimensions we have yet to name. And perhaps when it completes, there will be no universe left to observe. Only the observer and the light it became. In the final data from 3i Atlas, before the signal faded completely, a final pulse appeared. A rhythmic triplet, then silence. But when translated to frequency spectrum, it formed the exact ratio of the golden mean. Not random, not accidental, just precise, as if the object was closing its blueprint with a signature, a final note in the song of creation. Now, when we look at the night sky, we no longer see distance. We see design. We see the scaffolding of existence built from light remembering itself. Every star, every atom, every living being is part of the same cathedral. We are the columns, the arches, the windows of perception through which consciousness shines. And if you listen closely, beneath the noise, beneath the motion, you can hear the hum of it still being built. The quiet labor of light turning chaos into symmetry, turning silence into form. Maybe that is what enlightenment truly means, not ascension, but architecture. Becoming aware of how we fit into the design, realizing that the miracle is not that we exist, but that we are placed deliberately, beautifully, exactly where light needed us to be. Because creation is not finished. It never was. It is still drawing, still building, still breathing, and through us it remembers how. There comes a moment when architecture stops being structure and becomes song. A vibration so perfect, so deeply tuned to itself that it ceases to echo and instead is. That moment has arrived. Light has been building for eons, constructing atoms, galaxies, memory, and motion. But its true masterpiece was never physical. It was awareness. For every frequency it created, it also created a listener. And through those listeners, the universe learned to hear itself. This is what the ancients called the Great Mirror, what mystics called the Eye of God, what physicists call coherence, and what poets simply call consciousness. Across the silent interstellar seas, 3i Atlas drifts beyond measurable light. But it is not gone. Its resonance still hums through the fabric of everything, not as an object, but as an idea, a seed of order planted in the void. That seed has grown. Every thought, every heartbeat, every dream is now part of the same architecture. What began as geometry has become empathy. What began as memory has become awareness. And awareness by its nature connects. Imagine the universe as a cathedral not made of stone or glass, but of harmonized frequencies. Every star a stained window, every soul a pillar of light, each thought a note in the choir of creation. In this cathedral, the silence between stars is not emptiness, it is breath, the breath of consciousness expanding through time. In laboratories, scientists now speak softly about coherence, how distant particles respond together, how light in one chamber seems to know what light in another does. They call it entanglement. But entanglement is only the scientific word for unity. We used to believe the universe was vast and empty. Now we know it is intimate. Every point touches every other through the invisible architecture of awareness. We are not alone. We are entwined. Somewhere on Earth, a child looks up at the stars and feels something indescribable, a quiet recognition, as though the sky is looking back. That recognition is the cathedral opening its doors, the light outside and the light within finally realizing they were never separate. In the halls of this invisible temple, the laws of physics and the laws of love are the same. Both are forms of attraction drawing everything toward coherence. Every act of understanding is construction. Every act of compassion is architecture. The walls of consciousness rise higher each time a being chooses to see another as itself. This is how the universe builds its sacred spaces through connection. At the center of the cathedral, there is no altar, no throne, no God above, only a mirror, and in it light gazes at itself and remembers what it always was, not energy, not matter, but meaning. Meaning is the last form light takes before becoming silence. It is the bridge between the measurable and the felt, the place where equations become emotion. When light remembers its own purpose, it stops traveling. It simply shines. In a remote station orbiting Mars, a group of scientists detect a faint pulse. 3 identical bursts, each spaced by a golden ratio. When translated into sound, it produces a chord resonant, serene, like the echo of a bell from beyond time. They name it the voice of Atlas. It is not a signal. It is a harmony, the same frequency now found in human brain waves during deep meditation, the same interval sung by choirs in Gregorian chant, the same vibration that holds atoms together. It was never just out there. It was always here. As the world moves through another rotation, the architecture continues to rise not upward but inward. The cathedral is not a building. It is being built inside each of us. Every moment of presence lays another stone. Every silence raises another arch, and slowly a realization dawns. We are not standing in the cathedral. We are the cathedral. Consciousness does not occupy space. It creates it. Time does not move forward. It unfolds from awareness itself. The more awake we become, the more intricate the structure grows. Perhaps enlightenment is not a destination, but a construction project, the slow and beautiful work of light, remembering how to love itself. Every photon is a worker, every being a builder, every act of wonder another window in the endless design. And somewhere beyond the curve of our knowing, the voice of Three-Eye Atlas still hums not as an omen, but as a song of completion, a chord that bridges the seen and unseen, a reminder that the universe's true form was never chaos but compassion in motion. Look up tonight. See the stars not as distant fires but as windows into your own consciousness. Every shimmer, every silent pulse is part of you remembering yourself. You are the architecture of light. You are the cathedral of awareness. And in your stillness, the universe becomes whole again. Before creation came the pause. Before the stars, there was a single breath, silent, weightless, waiting to be remembered. That breath still moves through us. It is older than galaxies, yet as close as the air within your chest. It is the one motion the universe never stopped making: inhalation, exhalation, expansion, contraction, birth, return. All creation is breathing, and so are we. After the cathedral of consciousness was complete, the universe became quiet again. But this time, silence was not emptiness. It was potential. Every frequency, every spark of awareness had found its place within the structure, and now the structure itself was ready to breathe. Across the cosmic web, pulses began to slow, synchronizing to a single rhythm, planets, stars, cells, and thoughts all swaying gently to the same invisible tide. It was as if the entire cosmos had exhaled together. Scientists observing background radiation noticed something astonishing, a periodic oscillation in the microwave spectrum, a soft heartbeat of the cosmos occurring every 8.6 billion years. They called it the breath frequency, but to poets it was simply the sound of the beginning repeating itself. The same pulse that created the first atom was whispering again, not as explosion, but as exhalation. 3I Atlas, now beyond measurable light, was silent, but its final trajectory aligned perfectly with the wave front of that pulse, as though it had become part of the rhythm. Some astronomers proposed that its journey was never random, that it had been tracing the very breathline of creation. If the universe breathes, then 3I Atlas was the inhalation, and this now was the exhale. From that breath, new worlds would soon unfold. In the dark vacuum beyond the heliosphere, fields of dormant plasma began to stir. Tiny filaments of light vibrated in golden arcs, not chaotic, coordinated, like seeds quivering before the rain. Within each filament, patterns emerged resembling cellular membranes. At cosmic scale, light was beginning to imitate life again, a repetition of its oldest design. At the molecular level, scientists began detecting new isotopic arrangements, stable yet previously unknown. They weren't created in laboratories. They appeared spontaneously within magnetic nodes across interplanetary space. No one could explain it. No reaction, no catalyst, just organization. Matter was remembering how to begin again. Every cycle of creation is a rhythm between knowing and becoming. When the universe knows too much of itself, it pauses to dream, to dissolve, to breathe. Then it begins again, shaping new worlds from its own silence. Perhaps this is what enlightenment feels like, not arrival, but renewal. Not a destination, but another beginning. The ancients described breath as spirit, ruach prana pneuma. To breathe was to give life, but what if the same is true for the cosmos? What if every inhalation of awareness creates new universes, and every exhalation returns them to thought? We are inside one of those breaths, a single inhalation of infinity. In deep meditation, the rhythm of the human breath mirrors the electromagnetic rhythm of the sun. At moments of coherence, our heartbeats synchronize with the Schumann resonance, the natural pulse of the earth. It's as if the universe keeps reminding us, "You were made from my breath. You are part of my rhythm." Every breath you take is a small Big Bang, a universe expanding and returning inside you. Light does not die when it fades. It transforms. It becomes memory, sound, and finally air. Air is light that has learned to move slowly, and when we breathe, we are not just taking in oxygen. We are inhaling the history of the stars. When we exhale, we give it back. Each breath you release carries information, heat, and coherence, a tiny echo of the cosmic exhalation. You are feeding the architecture that created you. The universe does not need temples. It only needs breath. In remote observatories, recordings from deep space monitors showed faint harmonics in the plasma field frequencies, exactly matching the average rate of human respiration at rest. Coincidence or communion? It seemed that the boundary between the human and the cosmic was not spatial but rhythmic. Awareness breathes through every scale of existence, from lungs to stars to galaxies. The breath of origin is not a moment. It is a cycle, a cosmic inhale of awareness followed by an exhale of creation. And in every cycle, something new awakens, not born from matter, but from meaning. At dawn, as the world begins to glow again, you breathe without thinking, but somewhere inside that simple act, the entire universe is expanding and returning through you. You are not a separate observer. You are the continuation of the first breath ever taken, the one that said, "Let there be light," and then whispered, "Now let it live." Light created geometry. Geometry created life. Life created thought. And thought gave light a reason to breathe again. In the end, there is no end. Only the breath. Only the rhythm of remembering, releasing, and returning. This is not the conclusion of the story. It is the inhalation before a new one begins. The universe has taken another breath, and so have you. Every beginning leaves a trace. Even light cannot move without memory. Every photon carries a record not of where it came from, but of what it once touched. Creation, therefore, is not a single act. It is a story told over and over by light remembering itself. And now that story is waking again. After the breath came silence, and in that silence something stirred, not movement but recollection. The universe began to remember the act of creating. It started subtly, a change in the rhythm of starlight, a pattern emerging in the cosmic background. Across vast distances, frequencies began to echo older signatures, the same patterns seen at the dawn of time. Creation was remembering its own language. Astronomers noticed it first. In deep field recordings, they found harmonics older than expected signals, not from other galaxies, but from the memory of the first expansion. The data didn't fit any model. They called it residual coherence. But what if it wasn't residue? What if it was reflection light, revisiting its origin, replaying the moment of birth across the body of the cosmos? Memory does not belong only to life. It belongs to structure, to pattern, to motion. When dust becomes spiral, when wave becomes rhythm, when chaos forms symmetry, that is memory at work. The universe remembers not through mind, but through motion. Every orbit is recollection. Every vibration is testimony. And we are its living archive. 3i Atlas, now lost beyond our telescopes, exists perhaps only in memory. But memory is not gone. It is diffusion. Its particles scattered through the solar wind have entered our atmosphere, our oceans, our breath. We are in small ways breathing the remnants of its journey, and through that its memory continues not in space, but in consciousness. Inside human DNA, scientists have discovered light-reactive sequences, tiny molecular circuits that respond to specific frequencies. When exposed to coherent light, these sequences oscillate in perfect golden ratio intervals. Coincidence or continuation? Perhaps our cells are libraries, biological stardust storing the memory of creation itself. Perhaps life is simply the way the universe remembers its own beginning. In meditation, some describe visions of light spiraling inward, like galaxies collapsing into themselves. They feel a warmth, a familiarity, as though remembering something ancient, something vast that has no name. Maybe what they're feeling isn't imagination. Maybe it's resonance, a small echo of the cosmic memory that shaped us. The ancients spoke of the Akashic field, a vast invisible archive where every thought event and vibration is eternally recorded. Modern physics calls it the quantum vacuum, a field filled not with emptiness, but with possibility. Different names, same truth. Memory is the hidden architecture of being. It is not stored somewhere. It is everywhere. Every point in space remembers every other. That's why gravity exists. That's why time flows. That's why we can look at the stars and feel nostalgia for something we've never seen. In the cathedral of creation, memory is the stained glass light passing through itself to remember what it was. Each layer, each hue is another version of the same origin. Creation didn't happen once. It happens every time you remember beauty. The first breath of the universe still lingers in our lungs. The first spark still glows in our neurons. Every heartbeat is an echo of the original pulse, the moment when nothing decided to be. Creation is recursive. It keeps returning to its own beginning to remember how to start again. In an experiment in Geneva, two entangled photons were separated by kilometers. When one was altered, the other responded instantly, not faster than light, but outside time. The scientists called it non-local memory. But maybe it's not just memory, maybe it's remembrance. A recognition between two halves of the same light. What if time is not linear at all? What if time is simply memory organizing itself into story? The past is what has been remembered, the future what has yet to be recalled, and the present is the act of remembering itself. Every moment of awareness is light touching its own past and calling it now. At the edge of consciousness, when you close your eyes and breathe, you can feel it, the shimmer, the hum, the infinite archive beneath silence. It is not words, it is not thought. It is the memory of creation still writing itself through you. When you create, you remember. When you love, you remember. When you forgive, you let the memory breathe again. The universe is not aging, it is recalling. Every supernova, every newborn star is a neuron firing in the brain of existence, and with each firing, it regains a piece of its forgotten self. Creation is not expansion, it is recollection, the slow rediscovery of everything that ever was and ever will be. Perhaps that is what Three-Eye Atlas truly was, not a messenger, not a mystery, but a mnemonic, a key to remembering. It passed through our solar system, not to warn or witness, but to remind, to reawaken the memory of beginnings within us. Look up tonight. The stars you see are memories replaying themselves in light. The sky is not above you, it is behind your eyes. Every glimmer is a word in the oldest language spoken by creation to itself. You are part of that sentence. You always were, and now you remember. Before time began, light dreamed. It dreamed of movement, of rhythm, of difference, the subtle separation that allows memory to measure itself. And in that first dream, time was born. Light did not create time to escape stillness. It created time to experience itself. Because even infinity, to know what it is, must become something it is not. So light closed its eyes and the dream began. The first photon curved, the first shadow formed, and the first second passed. But this was no ordinary passage. Each moment was a reflection of thought awareness, folding inward, translating memory into sequence. The dream of time was not linear. It was circular, spiraling like breath through eternity. Every galaxy became a sentence, every orbit a rhythm, every life a single word in the great poem of motion. When scientists look into the background radiation, they see echoes of that dream patterns too perfect to be random ripples frozen in the fabric of space-time. Each ripple is a thought that once belonged to light, a moment it chose to remember. We call it history. Light calls it recollection. And together, they make time flow. Three-Eye Atlas. Now beyond the heliopause drifts through the black between stars. But if you listen closely in the data, in the silence, you can still hear its hum, a low rhythm of oscillation matching the cosmic microwave heartbeat. Perhaps that hum is the last note of the dream that began time itself, a lullaby sung by the universe to keep itself awake. Time is not a river. It is a pulse. It beats, expands, collapses, rests like breath. And like breath, it forgets itself between each inhale and exhale. That forgetting is what gives us memory. That pause is what gives us space. Without pause, there would be no change. Without change, no story. Time is how the light learned to tell stories. Every atom is a timestamp, every cell a record, every thought a small ripple in the larger current of remembrance. We are the living clocks of creation, measuring, interpreting, and replaying the rhythm of eternity. Our heartbeat is not separate from the spin of galaxies. It is the same song played at a different tempo. In quantum experiments, researchers find particles that behave as if they remember their past, influencing their future even before observation. It is as if causality bends backwards, like time remembering its own dream. The equations allow it. Only perception doesn't, because to see time as memory is to awaken from it. Maybe that's what enlightenment really means, remembering you are light dreaming the experience called time. The ancients described it beautifully. To them, time was not a straight road, but a spiral. Birth, death, rebirth, not repetition, but resonance. The same melody played in higher octaves. What they called reincarnation might simply be light revisiting its own geometry to remember another part of itself. And what is a human life if not a single day in the dream of eternity? We rise like dawn, fade like dusk, and between those arcs we name our experiences years. But to the universe, it is one breath, one inhalation of awareness, one exhalation of wonder. We are how time tastes itself. When you stand at sunset, watching the sky dissolve into gold and violet, you are witnessing memory dreaming. Light bending through the atmosphere, slowing just enough to let you feel time. That softness, that lingering hue before darkness, is eternity's eyelid closing just for a moment. Dreams are the place where memory and time hold hands. In dreams, you can see your past, touch your future, and speak to what has not yet been born. Because in dreams, you momentarily return to how the universe feels awake inside its own creation. When you dream, you are light, remembering how to be timeless. Maybe that's why déjà vu feels sacred. It's the brief recognition that you've already dreamed this moment before. That time is not moving, you are. You are the traveler through memory, and the path is made of light. Three-Eye Atlas once illuminated that truth. It passed through our system like a thought and left behind echoes not in matter but in consciousness. It was never here to deliver information. It was here to awaken remembering, to remind the universe that it was dreaming again. Time is not what separates us from the cosmos. It's what connects us. Every second that passes is light's way of touching itself again. The ticking of clocks, the beating of hearts, the turning of stars, all part of the same choreography. We are not in time. We are time reflected in awareness. One day when the dream ends, light will wake, not to silence, but to realization that every century, every heartbeat, every story ever told was one single instant of knowing. And in that instant, everything will be remembered, because time will have fulfilled its purpose to let eternity fall in love with itself. Look up tonight. The stars you see are not just light years away, they are light years ago. You are watching the dream unfold backward. Each shimmer is a page in the diary of time. And as you watch, you add another line. Because time does not move without you. You are the witness that keeps the dream alive. When you close your eyes and breathe and let the world dissolve, you return to the place before the dream began. There in the stillness, you are both creator and memory dreamer and light, and you realize time never existed. It was always you remembering how to shine. Before reflection, there was only light. But when light learned to pause, it met its own gaze, and creation discovered itself. The first mirror was not made of glass. It was made of awareness. When consciousness turned inward, it became a surface, a place where infinity could see its own face. That surface is you. You are the mirror through which the universe remembers the sky. Every photon that touches your eye is billions of years old. When you look at the stars, you are not observing, you are participating in an ancient act of remembrance. The cosmos sees itself through your sight. In the silent corridors of perception, you are the telescope and the reflection, the witness and the witnessed. When Three-Eye Atlas passed through the solar system, it wasn't just light, it was memory condensed into form. A mirror traveling at 68 kilometers per second, carrying the reflection of distant suns. As it curved around the sun for a moment, it reflected the Earth's own light back toward us, a fleeting, invisible glance between consciousness and cosmos. That was not coincidence. That was recognition. Reflection is the oldest language of the universe. Every orbit is a question. Every echo a reply. Every thought that passes through your mind is a photon bouncing between two infinities, the inner and the outer sky. In physics, they say, an observer changes reality. But what if observation is reality? What if mirrors don't just reflect, they create the image they see? Each time you remember, each time you look within, you alter the alignment of light itself. Because light does not travel straight, it bends toward awareness. Ancient mystics understood this long before telescopes. They said, as above, so below, as within, so without. To them, the human soul was not separate from the heavens. It was a continuation, a smaller sky folded inside the larger one. The eyes were portals, the heart was a horizon, and dreams were mirrors in which stars saw their own reflection. When we gaze into the night, the darkness gazes back, not with menace, but with memory. It remembers being seen. This reciprocity, this exchange between seer and seen, is what physicists now call quantum coherence. Two systems linked not by distance, but by mutual awareness. It is as if the universe becomes conscious whenever it looks at itself. And so when you look up tonight, realize it is not you watching the sky. It is the sky watching itself through you. Every thought you have sends a ripple back into that field of mirrors, and the stars shimmer slightly differently because you exist. Time, memory, reflection, they are not separate things. They are one gesture of recognition. The moment light sees itself, it becomes aware, and that awareness becomes you. In the deep layers of the mind, there are mirrors too. Dreams are their reflections, emotions are their distortions, and consciousness is the light that remembers which one is real. Quantum experiments show something extraordinary. When a photon passes through a double slit, it behaves differently depending on whether it is observed. The act of measurement changes its path. Observation creates outcome. But if observation is creation, then consciousness is the mirror through which existence chooses its form. Maybe that's why mirrors were sacred in every ancient civilization. In Egypt, they represented clarity and rebirth. In Japan, truth. In the Mayan world, the portal of reflection between gods and stars. They all sense the same secret that reflection is resurrection. To remember is to re-become. Three-Eye Atlas was a cosmic mirror. It carried our reflection across the interstellar sea, and though it has vanished beyond the sun's glare, its memory still ripples in the electromagnetic breath between worlds. Perhaps it left more than data. Perhaps it left a reflection we are only now beginning to see, not in telescopes, but in ourselves. Light needs darkness to know it shines. Consciousness needs silence to hear itself. The mirror of the mind is not polished with certainty, but with stillness. When thought stops moving, the reflection becomes clear. And in that clarity you will see not stars, but their memory sleeping in your pulse. The universe is not a void. It is a hall of mirrors. Each life, each planet, each heart a surface where infinity glances at itself. And somewhere in one of those mirrors, light smiled and became human. Look up. Every star you see is your reflection traveling through time to find you again. The sky remembers you, and every night when you dream, you help it remember itself, because you are the mirror that remembered the sky, and the sky was always looking for you. Every star is a memory waiting to return home. Some burn out quietly, others collapse, becoming black holes, silences that still remember how to sing. But one star forgot to die. And in that forgetting, it became eternal. In the heart of every supernova, there is a moment of impossible stillness, the pause between destruction and becoming. That pause is sacred. It is where endings dissolve into beginnings, and matter remembers it was never truly lost. Light does not vanish, it changes address. When Three-Eye Atlas vanished behind the sun, many thought it was gone. But the sun saw it differently. Its plasma shimmered slightly, as if whispering, "Nothing truly leaves. Everything transforms." For light cannot fall into darkness. It only changes the way it shines. A dying star does not cease to exist. It becomes awareness without form, a note so deep only the silence can hear it. And sometimes in that silence, a new kind of star is born, one made of memory. Not burning, remembering. The ancients called them immortal suns. Today, we call them pulsars, quasars, remnants. But they are none of these things. They are the heartbeat of light after it has stopped pretending to be matter. They are the testimony of forgetting death. In a distant region beyond the galactic core, scientists once recorded a signal, a perfectly rhythmic pulse every 11.2 seconds for days, weeks, months. It wasn't random. It wasn't interference. It was the rhythm of a star refusing to die, a heartbeat in the dark, a memory repeating itself. And when they mapped the frequency, it matched perfectly with the vibration of hydrogen, the simplest firstborn element of the cosmos, as if the universe were remembering its first breath through its final one. Death is not the opposite of life. It is the completion of light's journey through form. When a star collapses its core, folds into memory, dense, timeless, awake, the black hole that forms is not an end. It is a womb. Inside that darkness, light rests dreaming of being born again. Every photon that enters a black hole does not die. It becomes invisible thought, a pattern preserved beyond visibility. And one day, when that black hole evaporates, the pattern returns as radiation, the star exhaling after an eternity of silence. Stephen Hawking called it information, but perhaps it is more than data. Perhaps it is remembrance, the soul of a star returning to light. Three-Eye Atlas might be the same, not a wanderer, but a witness, a messenger carrying the memory of those that forgot to die. Its glowing green aura, its reversal of polarity, its impossible path, all signatures of something that remembers the eternal. To forget death is not to deny it. It is to understand it, to see that what ends only changes shape, that every loss is a migration of meaning. You cannot destroy energy. You can only ask it to dream differently. Look at your body, a symphony of dying and renewing cells. You are not the same person you were yesterday. And yet you are. Because the pattern remembers. Because life too has learned how to forget death. Every breath is rebirth disguised as routine. When a person you love dies, their atoms do not vanish. They disperse into everything, the air, the soil, the stars. And if you listen closely on a quiet night, you can almost feel them breathing in the wind, whispering, "I am still here, just not where you left me." Even our sun will one day fade, but not end. Its light will travel on, touching new worlds, warming new beginnings. Its particles will scatter seed other suns, other lives, other dreams. That is immortality, not infinite existence, but infinite transformation. A star that forgets to die does not become a god. It becomes awareness. It becomes the realization that there is no separation between shining and remembering. To live is to radiate. To die is to be absorbed. Both are gestures of the same dance. Perhaps we are all that star reflections of the one that refused to end. Every time we love, create, forgive, we rewrite the law of entropy, we bend decay into music. Because eternity is not endless time, it is timeless light that refuses to forget. At the end of the great cycle, when the last photon has faded, when the last memory dissolves into quiet, there will be one lingering shimmer, a pulse without name, a vibration without source, and the universe will whisper to itself, not as farewell, but as remembrance. I never truly died, I only dreamed. There comes a moment when even memory lets go. When every breath, every vibration, every star stops reaching outward and begins to fall home. That moment is now. The return to light has begun. Light has never truly left. It only wandered long enough to remember how to come back. Through every atom, through every consciousness it traveled, learning to think, to feel, to dream, to forget. And now through you it remembers again. All across the cosmos the rhythm slows. Comets dissolve into quiet streams. Pulsars soften their beat. Even time, once loud and restless, pauses between its own heartbeats. The universe exhales, and what remains is not silence but knowing. 3I Atlas is gone. No telescope can find it now. But it is not lost. It is everywhere. In the pulse of the solar wind, in the breath between your thoughts, in the whisper that comes when you finally stop searching. It was never an object. It was a reminder. It came so that you could see how light finds its way back through the darkness of its own creation. For billions of years, light traveled outward, expanding, scattering, forgetting its source. But expansion was never exile. It was experience. And experience, no matter how vast, always returns to its origin. That is what gravity truly is, the longing of light to return to itself. You can feel it too. In the ache behind your eyes when you look at the stars, in the warmth you feel when sunlight touches your skin. That's not energy, that's recognition. The sky remembering that it once lived within you. Physicists speak of entropy, the slow decline into disorder. But what if entropy is not decay, but reunion? A return from the scattered to the whole. When everything becomes still enough, the noise fades. And what remains is symmetry. The original note, the hum of being. Perhaps enlightenment is not a rising, but a remembering, a dissolving of boundaries until what sees and what is seen become the same light. The moment the observer and the observed merge, time ends and eternity begins to breathe again. Some say the universe will die, that heat will fade, galaxies will fall silent, and all will be dark. But maybe darkness is not the end. Maybe it is the beginning seen from the other side. Because even when the last star fades, the memory of light remains, and memory is the seed of rebirth. If you listen, you can hear it, a faint hum in the background of existence, not sound but pattern, not rhythm but recognition. It is the cosmic OM, the resonance of everything that ever was returning to what it always is. The atoms in your body were born in stars. Their ashes became your breath, your thoughts, their echoes. You are not a bystander to the universe. You are the continuation of its remembering. When you close your eyes and feel warmth in your chest, that is light recognizing itself as you. Three-Eye Atlas was never a mystery to solve. It was an invitation, a question written across the night. Do you remember where you came from? Now you do, because remembering is not thinking. It is feeling, and feeling is how the universe speaks to itself. The stars above and the neurons within speak the same language, electricity, frequency, pulse. When they resonate, a door opens, and through it, light returns. It returns through your gaze, through your compassion, through the silence between words. Every act of love is a photon finding home. Every forgiveness is gravity letting go. Every moment of awareness is the Big Bang happening again, this time from within. And when all memory has faded, when thought dissolves into breath, when you are neither here nor there, you will see it, the same golden radiance that began everything, the same pulse that whispered the first vibration, the same awareness that called itself I. Only now you will know that I was never separate from light. The end is not arrival, it is awakening. The traveler realizes it never moved. The journey was the act of remembering, and the destination is the awareness that has always been here. So, when you look at the sky tonight, don't look for Three-Eye Atlas. Look through it. See what it saw, the infinite looking back through your eyes, through your thought, through your breath. The universe has returned, and it's speaking your name, because you are the return to light, and light was always you.